The morning sun rose over New Haven Colony like it did every other day. The light was softer here than on Earth, filtered through the thin atmosphere of Kepler 22b's largest moon. Farmers walked through fields of genetically modified wheat that swayed in the gentle breeze. Children ran to school with bags on their backs, laughing and pushing each other playfully. It was a peaceful place, a quiet place, and the 40,000 humans who called it home believed they had found paradise among the stars. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the balcony of the administration building and watched his colony wake up. He was 62 years old, retired from Earth's military for almost 15 years now. His hair had turned gray and his bones ached on cold mornings, but he had never been happier. New Haven was his home, his responsibility, and his pride. "Beautiful morning," said Dr. Laura Mitchell as she joined him with 2 cups of coffee. She was the colony's chief medical officer, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and steady hands. She handed him 1 cup, and they stood together in comfortable silence. "The Vraxian delegation arrives today," Daniel said after a while. His voice carried a hint of worry that he could not hide. Laura nodded slowly. "I know. The council says they come in peace. Trade negotiations, they said." "The council says many things." Daniel took a sip of his coffee. "I served during the border conflicts 20 years ago. I saw what the Vraxians did to the colonies they conquered. They do not change, Laura. They only wait." But orders were orders. The Galactic Council had welcomed humanity into their alliance 60 years ago, and Earth had followed their rules ever since. Diplomacy first, always, patience and understanding, non-aggression unless attacked. These were the principles that governed interstellar civilization, and humanity had accepted them without question. The Vraxian ships entered orbit at noon. There were 5 of them, sleek and dark against the blue sky. Daniel watched them descend toward the landing zone outside the colony walls. His security chief, a young man named Kevin Park, stood beside him with a tablet in his hands. "5 ships, Commander," Kevin reported, "each carrying approximately 200 personnel. They claim it is a standard diplomatic escort." 1,000 soldiers for a trade meeting," Daniel muttered. "Does that seem normal to you?" Kevin hesitated. "No, sir, it does not." But there was nothing they could do. New Haven had no military. They had farming equipment and medical supplies and schools full of children. They had trust in the system that was supposed to protect them. The Vraxian leader was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His name was High Commander Zorthas, and he smiled with too many teeth as he shook Daniel's hand at the landing zone. "Commander Hayes," Zorthas said in a voice that sounded like gravel scraping against metal. "What a lovely little colony you have built here. So peaceful, so unprotected." Daniel felt ice in his stomach. "We are protected by the Council's treaties, High Commander, as are all member species." Zorthas laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Of course, the treaties. How could I forget?" The meetings began that afternoon. Daniel sat across from Zorthas in the conference room while diplomats from both sides discussed trade routes and resource sharing. Everything seemed normal on the surface. Words were exchanged, documents were reviewed, hands were shaken. But Daniel could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong. That night, he called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. Laura was there, along with Kevin and the heads of each department. They gathered in the small room behind Daniel's office, speaking in hushed voices. "I want increased patrols around the colony perimeter," Daniel ordered. "All civilians should stay indoors after dark. I am requesting military support from Earth, but it will take weeks to arrive." "Do you really think they would attack?" asked the agriculture director, a woman named Susan Moore. "The council would never allow it." "The council is not here," Daniel replied. "We are alone, and I do not trust our guests." But he was too late. At 6 in the morning, just as the sun began to rise over New Haven, the Vraxian ships opened fire. There was no warning, no declaration of war, no ultimatum. One moment, the colony was waking up for another peaceful day, and the next moment, buildings were exploding into flame. Daniel was thrown from his bed by the first explosion. He stumbled to the window and saw hell unfolding before his eyes. Vraxian soldiers poured through the streets, shooting everything that moved. Men, women, children, it did not matter. They killed them all. "Laura!" he screamed into his communicator. "Laura! Are you there?" Static answered him. He grabbed his old service pistol from the drawer beside his bed and ran outside. The air was thick with smoke and screams. Bodies lay in the streets, some of them so small that he had to look away. A Vraxian soldier spotted him and raised its weapon. Daniel fired first, and the creature fell. But there were more behind it, dozens more, hundreds more. He fought his way toward the communications center, hoping to send a distress call to Earth. Along the way, he found Kevin Park crouched behind an overturned vehicle, bleeding from a wound on his head. "Kevin," Daniel pulled the young man to his feet. "We need to reach the communications array." "Sir, they are everywhere," Kevin gasped. "The whole colony is gone. Everyone is dead or dying." "Then we make sure Earth knows what happened here. We make sure they see everything." They ran through streets filled with death. Daniel saw things that would haunt him for whatever remained of his life. Families gunned down in their homes, children crying over the bodies of their parents. The Vraxians were not just killing, they were enjoying it. They laughed as they murdered, recording everything on their own devices. The communications center was still standing when they arrived. Kevin stumbled inside and began working frantically at the controls, while Daniel guarded the door. "I can send a data burst," Kevin said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Everything from the security cameras, all the recordings, everything." "Do it," Daniel ordered. A Vraxian squad appeared at the end of the street. Daniel raised his pistol and fired until it was empty. He took down 3 of them before they returned fire. The shots hit him in the chest, and he fell backward into the building. "Tell Earth what happened here," he whispered to Kevin as darkness crept into his vision. "Tell them everything." Kevin finished the transmission just as the Vraxians broke through the door. He stood up slowly, hands raised, and faced the soldier who pointed a weapon at his face. "My name is Kevin Park," he said clearly, knowing the recording was still running. "I am a citizen of Earth, and you will pay for what you have done today." The soldier pulled the trigger. 6 hours after the attack began, New Haven was silent. 40,000 human beings were dead. The Vraxians broadcast the massacre across every channel in the galaxy, laughing as they described how easily the humans died, how they begged, how they posed no threat whatsoever. They thought it was a victory. They were wrong. The transmission from New Haven arrived on Earth at 3 in the afternoon, local time in Geneva. The United Earth Parliament was in session, debating agricultural subsidies for the outer colonies. It was a normal day filled with normal problems, and no one expected what came next. Secretary General Maria Santos was reviewing documents when her aide burst through the door without knocking. The young woman's face was pale, her hands shaking as she held out a tablet. "Madam Secretary," she whispered, "you need to see this. Everyone needs to see this." Maria took the tablet and pressed play. For the next 30 minutes, she watched her people die. The recording showed everything. The Vraxian ships opening fire on sleeping civilians. Soldiers marching through streets and shooting anyone they found. Children screaming for parents who were already dead. And through it all, the sound of Vraxian laughter, cruel and mocking and filled with pleasure. The final image was Kevin Park, standing tall with his hands raised, speaking his last words into the camera before a Vraxian soldier executed him. Maria Santos had led Earth through difficult times. She had negotiated treaties with hostile species, resolved conflicts between colonies, and guided humanity through two economic depressions. She was known for her calm demeanor, her steady voice, her ability to find solutions when others saw only problems. But as she watched 40,000 of her people murdered, something inside her went cold. Something ancient and terrible woke up in her chest. And she understood for the first time why her ancestors had once been the most feared predators on their planet. She walked into the Parliament chamber and said 3 words that silenced every voice in the room. "Watch the screens." The recording played for the entire assembly. Diplomats and generals, scientists and politicians, representatives from every nation on Earth watched in horror as New Haven died. Some wept openly. Others sat frozen, unable to process what they were seeing. A few left the room to vomit. Admiral Christopher Grant stood at the back of the chamber, his fists clenched at his sides. He was 60 years old, a career military officer who had spent his life preparing for wars that never came. Earth had been at peace for so long that many people questioned why they even needed a defense fleet. Now he knew the answer. His daughter had been on New Haven. She was 18 years old, visiting with a school group to study agricultural techniques. Her name had appeared on the list of the dead, confirmed by DNA records recovered from the transmission. The Admiral did not cry. He did not scream. He simply watched the recording until it ended, memorizing every detail, every face, every act of cruelty. And then he began to plan. The Galactic Council responded within hours. Their official statement expressed deep concern over the unfortunate incident at New Haven. They promised a full investigation and urged humanity to remain calm while diplomatic channels were explored. "Diplomatic channels," Admiral Grant said quietly when he heard the statement. 40,000 dead. And they want diplomatic channels. Secretary General Santos held a private meeting with her senior advisors that night. The room was filled with the most powerful people on Earth, but none of them spoke. They waited for her to lead, as they always did. "What are our options?" Maria asked. "The Council has asked us to file a formal complaint," said Benjamin Cole, Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. He was a soft-spoken man with gray hair and gentle eyes, known throughout the galaxy for his patience and diplomacy. "They will convene a hearing in 3 months to review the evidence." 3 months, Maria repeated. "And what will happen to the Vraxians in those 3 months?" "Nothing. They are protected by Council protocols until a verdict is reached." Maria nodded slowly. "I see. And what does the Council suggest we do about the fact that the Vraxians are currently broadcasting our massacre as entertainment across their empire?" Benjamin had no answer for that. For 3 days, Earth said nothing. No official statements, no press conferences, no responses to the hundreds of messages pouring in from other species. The humans simply went silent. This confused the galaxy. The Vraxians openly mocked what they called human cowardice. They released more footage of the massacre, edited to emphasize the screaming and begging. They gave interviews describing how weak the humans were, how easily they died, how this proved that humanity had no place among the stars. Other species whispered among themselves. Perhaps the humans would simply accept this loss, as they had accepted so many insults over the decades. Perhaps they would trust in the Council's processes, file their complaints, and wait patiently for justice that would never come. That was what civilized species did, after all. On the 4th day, Maria Santos stood before the cameras and addressed the galaxy. She wore black. Her face was calm, but her eyes held something that made viewers uncomfortable, something they could not quite name. "For 60 years, humanity has been a member of the Galactic Council," she began. "We followed your rules. We respected your traditions. When we were insulted, we smiled and turned away. When we were cheated, we filed complaints and trusted in your processes. When we were wronged, we forgave and moved forward." She paused, and her voice grew harder. We did this because we believed in civilization. We believed that patience and diplomacy could solve any problem. We believed that if we showed kindness, we would receive kindness in return. Her hands gripped the podium, her knuckles turning white. 4 days ago, the Vraxian Empire murdered 40,000 of our people. Men, women, and children. They burned our colony to ash and laughed while they did it. They broadcast our suffering across the galaxy as entertainment. Maria leaned forward, and every being watching felt a chill run down their spine. The Council has asked us to be patient. They have asked us to trust in diplomatic channels. They have reminded us of our obligations to remain calm and civilized. She straightened up and took a deep breath. We have listened to your advice. We have considered your suggestions. And we have reached a decision. Her eyes seemed to burn through the screen. We are done being courteous. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, beings of every species stared at their screens in stunned silence. They did not understand what they had just heard. Humanity had always been so cooperative, so eager to please, so willing to compromise. What did this mean? What were the humans planning? In the Vraxian Empire, High Commander Zorthas watched the recording and laughed. He called his officers together and mocked the human leader's dramatic speech. What will they do? He asked, spreading his forearms wide. Send angry letters? File more complaints? The humans are farmers and merchants. They have no teeth, no claws, no will to fight. They will cry and complain and eventually accept what happened, as all weak species do. His officers laughed with him. They would not be laughing for long. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Christopher Grant entered a facility that officially did not exist. He walked through corridors carved from solid rock, past guards who saluted in perfect silence, until he reached a door marked with a single word: Prometheus. He placed his hand on the scanner and watched as the massive door slowly opened. Beyond it lay 60 years of preparation, 60 years of waiting, 60 years of hope that this day would never come, combined with the certainty that someday it would. Admiral Grant stepped inside, and humanity began to wake up. The facility beneath the Rocky Mountains stretched for miles in every direction. Admiral Christopher Grant walked through corridors that hummed with power, past rooms filled with equipment that the galaxy had never seen, through hangars that contained ships the Council did not know existed. 60 years ago, when Earth first joined the Galactic Council, the leaders of every nation gathered in secret. They had seen what happened to species that trusted too much in diplomacy. They had studied the histories of civilizations that disarmed in the name of peace, only to be conquered by those who did not share their values. And so they made a decision. Earth would follow the Council's rules in public. They would smile and cooperate and play the role of the peaceful newcomers. But in private, in secret, they would prepare for the day when smiles would not be enough. Project Prometheus was born from that decision. Every nation contributed resources, scientists, and soldiers. The project was hidden so deeply that even most Earth governments did not know its full extent. Only a handful of people understood what humanity had truly built over the past 6 decades. Admiral Grant was one of them. "Wake them up," he said to the officer at his side. "All of them. We move in 2 weeks." General Patricia Coleman received the call at midnight. She was 65 years old, officially retired, running a small restaurant in New Mexico that served the best enchiladas in the state. Her neighbors knew her as Pat, a friendly grandmother who told stories about her years in the Merchant Marine. They did not know that she had spent 30 years commanding Earth's most advanced warships in exercises that were classified so highly they did not exist on any record. "It's time," said the voice on the other end of the line. Patricia closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her grandchildren, her restaurant, the peaceful life she had built. Then she thought of the children at New Haven, screaming as they died. "I'll be there in 6 hours," she said. Across Earth and its colonies, similar calls went out to thousands of men and women. They came from all walks of life. Teachers and farmers, doctors and engineers, parents and grandparents. They had lived normal lives while waiting for a day they hoped would never come. Now it had come, and they answered. Dr. Samuel Torres was working in his laboratory when the summons arrived. He was a weapons engineer, officially employed by a company that made mining equipment. In reality, he had spent 40 years developing systems that could turn the tide of any war. He gathered his team and took them to a facility hidden beneath the Mojave Desert. There, behind doors that required 7 different security clearances to open, sat the fruits of their labor. "The Varaxians think we have no weapons," Samuel told his people. "They think our merchant ships are the best we can do. They think we are soft and weak and harmless." He smiled, and there was nothing friendly in it. "They have made a terrible mistake." The carrier Retribution was 3 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that used principles the Galactic Council had banned centuries ago. It had been built in sections across a dozen different facilities, assembled in the darkness of space where no sensors could detect it, and hidden in an asteroid field for 15 years. General Coleman stepped onto its bridge and felt the ship hum beneath her feet like a living thing. "Status report," she ordered. "All systems operational, General," replied her first officer, a young man named Marcus Webb. "Crew is at full strength. Weapons are loaded. We are ready." Patricia nodded and looked out through the main viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Vraxians were celebrating their victory over New Haven. They were laughing and boasting and planning their next massacre. They had no idea what was coming. The Galactic Council sent urgent messages demanding that Earth explain its intentions. Ambassador Benjamin Cole attended every meeting, smiled politely at every question, and provided no useful answers. "We are simply conducting internal security reviews," he said during one session. "Surely the Council understands that after such a tragic incident, we must evaluate our defensive posture. There are reports of unusual activity in your shipyards," pressed the Vraxian delegate. "Ships being launched that were not registered with the Council. Military movements that violate treaty protocols." Benjamin's smile never wavered. "I'm certain those reports are exaggerated. Earth has always been transparent with the Council about our military capabilities." This was technically true. Earth had been transparent about the capabilities they chose to reveal. They had simply chosen not to reveal very much. On Mars, factories that had supposedly been converted to civilian manufacturing roared back to life. Workers who had been trained for decades in secret finally put their skills to use. Ships rolled off assembly lines at a pace that would have shocked the galaxy if anyone had been watching. On Luna, shipyards that appeared abandoned from the outside began launching vessels into the darkness of space. They were fast and deadly and equipped with technology that Earth had developed in isolation, refusing to share it with anyone. And on Earth itself, millions of reservists reported for duty. They came from every country, every culture, every background. Some had served in the official defense fleet. Others had trained in secret programs that their own families knew nothing about. All of them shared one thing in common. They were ready to fight. Admiral Grant assembled his command staff aboard the Retribution for a final briefing before the fleet departed. "The Vraxian Empire controls 17 star systems," he began, pointing to a holographic map that floated in the center of the room. "They have over 1,000 warships and have never lost a war in their 500-year history." He paused and looked around at the faces of his officers. "We are going to change that." The plan was simple in concept, but incredibly complex in execution. Earth's fleet would strike fast and hard, using technology that the Vraxians had never encountered. They would not aim for territory or resources. They would aim for one thing only: the complete destruction of the Vraxian military. "Rules of engagement," Admiral Grant continued. We do not target civilians. We do not bomb cities. We do not murder innocent people to make a point. We are not them." General Coleman nodded in approval. "We show them that strength and honor can exist together. We show the galaxy what humanity truly is." "And what is that, General?" asked Marcus Webb. Patricia looked at the young man with eyes that held 60 years of preparation, 60 years of waiting, 60 years of hope that peace would prevail, mixed with the certainty that someday it would fail. "We are the species that spent 60 years pretending to be sheep," she said quietly. "Now they get to meet the wolves." The fleet launched 3 days later. 300 warships emerged from hiding places across the solar system and beyond. They moved in perfect formation, their crews working together with a precision that came from decades of secret training. As they passed the outer planets, Secretary General Maria Santos sent one final message to the Galactic Council. "Earth is exercising its right of self-defense under Article 7 of the Founding Charter," she stated. "We will not seek permission. We will not ask forgiveness. And we will not stop until justice is served." The council erupted in chaos. Species that had ignored the massacre at New Haven suddenly expressed grave concerns about Earth's actions. They demanded negotiations, threatened sanctions, and warned of consequences. Earth did not respond. The fleet was already moving toward Vraxian space, and nothing in the galaxy was going to stop it. High Commander Zorthas received the report of the approaching human fleet while eating dinner in his palace on Vraxian Prime. He read the numbers, laughed, and tossed the report aside. 300 ships, he said to his advisors. "We have over 1,000 in our home fleet alone. The humans come to commit suicide." His military commanders agreed. The Vraxians had conquered 12 species over 5 centuries. They had never lost a major battle. Their ships were large, heavily armed, and crewed by soldiers who had been bred for war since birth. The idea that a species of farmers and merchants could pose any threat was laughable. Zorthas ordered his fleet to meet the humans at the edge of Vraxian space. He wanted the battle recorded and broadcast across the galaxy. He wanted every species to see what happened to those who challenged Vraxian supremacy. "Make it slow," he commanded. "Make them suffer. I want the galaxy to hear them beg before we finish them." The two fleets met 3 weeks after Earth's launch, in a region of space known as the Hollow, a vast, empty zone between star systems where nothing grew and nothing lived. Commander Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of the destroyer Vigilant and watched the Vraxian fleet appear on her sensors. There were so many ships that they looked like a cloud of metal spreading across the darkness of space. "Counting over 1,100 enemy vessels," reported her tactical officer. "They outnumber us nearly 4 to 1. Lisa nodded calmly. "Then we'll have to work a little harder. Signal the fleet. Execute attack pattern Delta." The human ships moved first. Vraxian commanders watched in confusion as the smaller human fleet suddenly accelerated to speeds their sensors could barely track. The Vraxians had always relied on their superior numbers, forming massive walls of ships that crushed enemies through sheer firepower. They had never faced an opponent that refused to stand still. The Vigilant led the first assault wing directly into the heart of the Vraxian formation. Lisa had been training for this moment for 20 years. Every simulation, every exercise, every sleepless night studying tactical manuals had prepared her for this. "Fire everything," she ordered. The Vigilant's weapon systems unleashed energy that burned through Vraxian shields like they were made of paper. Human engineers had spent decades studying every species in the galaxy, learning their technologies, finding their weaknesses. The weapons they created were designed specifically to exploit those weaknesses. 3 Vraxian cruisers exploded in the first 30 seconds. Across the battlefield, human ships danced through the enemy fleet with deadly grace. They moved in coordinated patterns that the Vraxians could not predict, covering each other, drawing fire, creating openings that other ships exploited. Admiral Grant commanded the battle from the Retribution, watching the holographic display that showed the positions of every ship in both fleets. His voice was calm as he issued orders, adjusting formations, redirecting forces, turning chaos into coordinated destruction. Alpha Wing, push through Sector 7. Beta Wing, reinforce the eastern flank. Gamma Wing, prepare for the counterattack. The Vraxians had never faced anything like this. Their commanders screamed orders trying to adapt, but their tactics were designed for enemies who fought in straight lines and predictable patterns. The humans fought like water flowing around rocks, impossible to pin down, impossible to predict. 4 hours into the battle, the Vraxians had lost 300 ships. The humans had lost 47. High Commander Zorthus watched from his flagship in growing disbelief. This was not possible. The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to crumble at the first sign of real combat. Instead, they were tearing through his fleet like predators through prey. All ships, concentrate fire on their command carrier, he ordered. Destroy the Retribution. The Vraxian fleet reorganized, hundreds of ships turning their weapons toward Admiral Grant's vessel. The Retribution shuddered as enemy fire slammed into its shields. "Shields holding," reported the defensive officer. "But we can't take this for long." Grant nodded. "We won't need to." Signal General Coleman. From behind a nearby asteroid field, the second half of Earth's fleet emerged. 150 fresh warships that had been waiting in silent ambush for exactly this moment. General Patricia Coleman sat in the command chair of the carrier Vengeance and smiled grimly as her ships joined the battle. "All wings engage," she ordered. "No mercy, no retreat." The Vraxians found themselves caught between two forces. Their formation crumbled as human ships attacked from both sides. Commanders who had never known defeat panicked, issuing contradictory orders that only made the chaos worse. Commander Lisa Chen pushed the Vigilant deeper into enemy lines, hunting for the Vraxian flagship. Her ship had taken 17 direct hits. 3 decks were on fire and a quarter of her crew was dead or wounded, but she kept fighting. "There," she said, pointing at her display. "Zorthus is on that ship. The big one with the gold markings." Her first officer looked at her with wide eyes. "Commander, we can barely hold together. We can't take on a ship that size." Lisa thought of Kevin Park, standing alone in the communications center at New Haven, sending his final message. She thought of the children who never got to grow up, the families torn apart, the laughter that would never be heard again. "We don't need to destroy it," she said quietly. "We just need to get close enough." She turned to her crew. "All hands, prepare for ramming speed. Get to the escape pods. That's an order." Her crew hesitated for only a moment. Then they moved, following their commander's orders as they had been trained to do. One by one, they evacuated to the escape pods, until only Lisa remained on the bridge. "This is for New Haven," she whispered. The Vigilant accelerated toward the Vraxian flagship at maximum speed. Lisa aimed for the engine section, the weakest point in the enemy's design. Vraxian gunners fired desperately, but the small destroyer was moving too fast to stop. The impact tore through both ships. The Vraxian flagship lost power, spinning helplessly through space. The Vigilant was destroyed, but its escape pods were already safely away, carrying Lisa Chen and her surviving crew to pick up by friendly vessels. With their flagship crippled, the Vraxians broke. Ships began fleeing in every direction, abandoning their formation, abandoning their comrades, abandoning their pride. The species that had never known defeat suddenly learned what it felt like to lose. Admiral Grant did not let them escape. "All ships, pursue," he ordered. "We follow them to their homeworld. We end this today." The human fleet chased the retreating Vraxians across 3 star systems, destroying any ship that turned to fight, capturing those that surrendered. By the time they reached Vraxian Prime, the mighty Vraxian fleet had been reduced to less than 200 scattered vessels. Sergeant Kyle Bennett led the Marine squad that boarded the crippled flagship. His brother had been a teacher at New Haven, killed in the first hour of the massacre. Kyle had watched the recording of his death 17 times before he stopped counting. They found High Commander Zorthus hiding in a storage compartment near the engine room. The Vraxian who had ordered the deaths of 40,000 humans was cowering in a corner, his 4 arms wrapped around himself, his body shaking with fear. Kyle looked down at the creature and felt a rage so deep it threatened to consume him. It would be so easy to pull the trigger, so satisfying to watch this monster die the way his brother had died. But he remembered what Admiral Grant had said before the battle. "We are not them." He lowered his weapon and spoke words that would be broadcast across the galaxy. "High Commander Zorthus, by the authority of the United Earth Government, you are under arrest for crimes against humanity. You will stand trial. You will face justice. And you will spend the rest of your life knowing that the species you called weak and harmless has brought your empire to its knees." He signaled his squad to take the prisoner away. The battle was over. It had lasted 11 hours and had cost the Vraxians over 900 ships. Earth had lost 63. Admiral Grant stood on the bridge of the Retribution and looked out at Vraxian Prime, the heart of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. He thought of his daughter, of Kevin Park, of 40,000 voices silenced forever. Then he broadcast a message to every corner of known space. "This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. This is what happens when you slaughter our children and expect us to bow. Humanity does not forgive. Humanity does not forget. And humanity is no longer asking for permission." The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Secretary General Maria Santos walked through its doors. Representatives from 100 species watched her approach the central podium. Some looked at her with fear, others with anger. A few, very few, watched with something close to respect. She wore the same black dress she had worn during her speech 4 weeks ago. Her face was calm, her steps measured, her eyes steady. She looked like a woman who had made peace with difficult choices and was ready to face whatever came next. The council speaker, a tall being with blue skin and golden eyes, stood to address her. "Secretary General Santos," he said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "You stand before this council to answer for the actions of your species, the destruction of the Vraxian fleet, the invasion of Vraxian territory, the capture of High Commander Zorthus. These are violations of every treaty humanity has signed." Maria listened patiently until he finished. Then she smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "I understand," she said, "and I would like to address each of your concerns." She turned to face the assembled representatives, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. 4 weeks ago, the Vraxian Empire murdered 40,000 of my people. They attacked without warning. They killed children in their beds. They laughed as they burned our colony to ash. She paused, letting her words sink in. "And what did this council do? You issued a statement expressing concern. You promised an investigation that would take months. You urged us to be patient while the creatures who butchered our families broadcast their crimes as entertainment." The chamber was absolutely silent. "For 60 years, humanity followed your rules. We trusted your systems. We believed that if we were good members of this community, we would be protected." Her voice grew harder. "We were wrong." The Vraxian representative, a young officer who had been appointed after most of his government fled or was captured, stood up angrily. "You have committed acts of war. You have destroyed our fleet. You have humiliated our empire. The council must impose sanctions, must punish Earth for these crimes." Maria turned to look at him with eyes that held no sympathy. "Your empire massacred our civilians. Your high commander is sitting in one of our prisons, awaiting trial for crimes against humanity. Your fleet is scattered, your military is broken, and your people are free for the first time in 5 centuries. She stepped closer to the Vraxian delegate. And you dare speak to us of crimes? The delegate sat down, unable to meet her gaze. Maria returned to the central podium and addressed the council once more. I did not come here to apologize. I did not come here to ask forgiveness. I came here to inform you of humanity's decision. She took a deep breath. Earth is withdrawing from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted, screamed, demanded explanations. Some called for Earth to be declared an outlaw species. Others argued that such a declaration would be meaningless given what humanity had just demonstrated. Maria waited for the noise to die down. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but carried to every ear. Any species that wishes to maintain peaceful relations with humanity may do so. We welcome trade, cooperation, and friendship. We have no interest in conquest or domination. She paused. But let me be clear about one thing. Any species that threatens our people, any government that harms our citizens, any being that thinks they can prey on humanity because we prefer peace to war. Her eyes swept across the chamber, meeting the gaze of every representative. They will learn the same lesson the Vraxians learned. We do not start fights, but we finish them. She turned and walked toward the door. Before she reached it, she stopped and looked back one final time. This council watched our children die and called it an incident. You asked us to trust in processes while our dead were mocked across the galaxy. You failed us when we needed you most. Her voice softened, and for a moment, she sounded almost sad. We will not make the mistake of trusting you again. She walked out, and the doors closed behind her. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed in ways that no one had predicted. The Vraxian Empire was dismantled. The 12 species they had conquered over the centuries were freed. Some chose to govern themselves. Others requested help from Earth in establishing new governments. All of them remembered who had liberated them and who had stood by while they suffered. High Commander Zorthus was tried before an international court on Earth. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy, and billions watched as evidence of his crimes was presented. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of release. He would spend his remaining days in a small cell, thinking about the massacre he had ordered and the consequences it had brought. The Galactic Council continued to exist, but its influence waned with each passing year. Species that had grown tired of its bureaucracy and ineffectiveness began seeking direct alliances with Earth. A new coalition formed, built on principles of mutual defense and genuine cooperation rather than endless debates and toothless resolutions. Admiral Christopher Grant retired from active service 3 years after the Battle of the Hollow. He bought a small farm in Montana, where he raised horses and watched his grandchildren play in fields that had never known war. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, he would look up at the stars and think of his daughter. He hoped she would have been proud of what humanity had become. General Patricia Coleman became the first commander of the Terran Alliance Defense Force. She spent the rest of her career training the next generation of officers, teaching them that strength without honor was merely brutality and that mercy was not weakness but the highest expression of power. Dr. Samuel Torres continued his research, developing new technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible, but he always hoped that his weapons would never be needed again. The best victory, he often said, was the one that never had to be fought. Commander Lisa Chen recovered from her injuries and was promoted to admiral. She commanded the patrol fleet that guarded human space, and under her watch, no enemy ever threatened Earth's colonies again. When asked about her decision to ram the Vraxian flagship, she simply said that some things were worth any price. Sergeant Kyle Bennett left the military and became a teacher, just like his brother had been. He taught history to young students on a dozen different worlds, making sure they understood both the costs of war and the values that made peace worth fighting for. And on the moon of Kepler 22b, where New Haven had once stood, humanity built a memorial. The fields were restored, the trees replanted, the rivers cleaned. But no one lived there now. It was a place of remembrance, visited by pilgrims from across human space who came to pay their respects to those who had been lost. At the center of the memorial stood a monument of white stone reaching toward the sky. On its surface were carved the names of all 40,000 victims, from the oldest grandfather to the youngest infant. At its base was a simple inscription that summarized everything humanity had learned from the tragedy. They died because we were courteous. We learned. Never again. Visitors would stand before the monument and read those words in silence. Some wept. Others simply bowed their heads. All of them understood what the words meant. Humanity had entered the galaxy as newcomers, eager to please, willing to compromise, hoping that kindness would be met with kindness. They had learned a painful lesson about the nature of the universe and the species that inhabited it. But they had also learned something about themselves. They had discovered that buried beneath their patience and diplomacy was something older and fiercer. Something that their ancestors had known, but that peaceful generations had nearly forgotten. Humanity was a species that could be pushed. They could tolerate insults and endure setbacks and forgive wrongs. They could smile and negotiate and turn the other cheek for decades at a time. But there was a line, and anyone who crossed it would discover that the friendly, cooperative, courteous humans were capable of becoming something else entirely. The galaxy learned that lesson at New Haven. They watched humanity transform from sheep into wolves in a matter of weeks. They saw what happened when the patient species decided it had been patient long enough. And they never forgot. In the centuries that followed, as humanity spread across the stars and built alliances with species who shared their values, one truth became known to every civilization in the galaxy. Do not mistake kindness for weakness. Do not confuse patience with passivity. And never ever give humanity a reason to stop being courteous. Because once they stop, they do not start again until the lesson has been thoroughly taught. The people of New Haven had not died in vain. Their sacrifice had awakened something in humanity that changed the course of galactic history. And their names, carved in white stone on a quiet moon, would be remembered as long as humans walked among the stars. Never again.